Robbie Keane underrated? It struck me that because he's been retired effectively for quite a period of time in people's minds, there isn't that much fanfare about his official announcement of his retirement.
Yeah, it is his second retirement in a way, though. You know, like that. It was August 2016 when he announced his Irish retirement, and I was just looking back yesterday, even just to see what coverage was like then, just to get a handle, just so we didn't use the same words again. But there was a lot more fanfare then. You know, that was sort of front back page stuff. Now there is still a certain amount today, and
that was the going away at the Aviva.
Yeah, that was the announcement of it, and then the official announcement, and then it was confirmed that he would still play against Oman the following week, and that was the official end. And of course he had his big farewell, and I mean in some ways that is a fitting farewell for Robbie, because Ireland was a massive thing to him, and I think 20 years from now will we be talking about Robbie's club career or his Irish career. It's possible more so the Irish side of things, because he set a record that's never going to be broken realistically. You know, for someone to get to 68 goals now, they're going to need to break through much earlier than the norms of when players break through. You know, we'll talk a bit about Troy Parrott in a while, but it's very hard for someone to come in, as Robbie did when he was 17.
Debut in 98.
And start scoring goals. I think he scored a couple of goals against Malta in October 98. You know, he scored on his debut for Wolves in 97 against Norwich in a championship game. Yeah. So, and I remember that. I remember the sort of watching those goals whenever highlights program was on, and at the time it didn't seem that unusual, because you had Duff breaking through, and you know, you occasionally have these. Even David Connolly had been around before at a sort of a younger age group. Now the player that does that is going to deal with responsibility, or deal with sort of expectations from the first time he plays. And that is the one thing about Robbie, to answer your question: underrated, overrated. I think maybe we will be able to sit back now and have a bit more of a considered debate about it, because I think when Robbie was playing, my piece today touched on it a small bit, like for more than half his life, Robbie's been in the spotlight. For pretty much the entirety of his Irish career, everything was expected of him, to the point where the expectations were probably unfair. Like 3 games without a goal and it's a drought, and what's wrong with Robbie? And even, I think Robbie, I don't have this to hand, but I'm pretty sure Kevin Doyle won more Player of the Year awards, until Robbie eventually towards the end, I think, got one to square it up. So even though Robbie was a better player than Kevin Doyle, there was almost a sense that when Kevin Doyle came along, and you know, he had a great story, and you know, a really good fella, and just there was a warmth to his tale, that it was like, oh yeah, Kevin Doyle, he's, you know, what a year. Whereas Robbie was just there the whole time, and sort of taken for granted because of that, you know. Whereas now you sit back and look at the body of work, sit back and see that on Sky at night, you can see his Premier League 100, all these goals, and I think it was an incredible career, actually. You know, but overrated, underrated. Oh God, I think
I would say vastly underrated, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I'd lean that way. But there were times, I wonder, you know, in his early years, there was so much on his shoulders, and maybe there was an expectation created from that what type of player was he? You know, and maybe he had disappointments that were magnified because of his profile. Yeah,
so what type of player was he is actually a really good question. Was he a number 9? Probably not. Was he a number 10? Probably not.
He was somewhere in between. He was a 9.5, you know, and that is the phases of his career, because I know we're talking about the Robbie era and stuff, and not to sort of jump straight into it, but his best football, ironically enough, was probably played with Berbatov at Spurs, I would say. In that period before his move to Liverpool, he was fantastic. And yet, like, Berbatov was, I mean, he wore 9, but Berbatov he drifted as well, and they seemed to have this like great understanding between them, that they could mix it up. It wasn't a case of Niall Quinn and Robbie, where one was, you know, he was sort of living off the flicks off the other. They just seemed to have this great natural football understanding. They knew where to pass it. They were 2 really good players, and that actually was probably his best, rather than playing off a big man or playing with a speedster. You know, like, it was that was the combination that worked.
Berbatov was a big man, so he had that.
No, he had that ability, I guess.
And I don't think that's a coincidence, though. I think that, like, Berbatov is kind of a Quinn 2.0, and that helps. It definitely feels like that. Also, there's more movement with Berbatov than there would have been with Quinn at that stage of the Quinn era.